It shows 6:01 on my clock, so we can get started.
Alrighty then. Welcome everyone to the Planning Commission meeting of January 25th. I'm going to start by reading my Zoom script. This meeting is being conducted utilizing teleconferencing and electronic means consistent with State of California executive orders regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. Zoom is being utilized for this meeting. In case of technical issues, meetings will be uploaded to the city website as soon as possible after this meeting. We will be conducting today's meeting in a virtual setting using Zoom. Planning commissioners and staff are participating from remote locations, practicing appropriate social distancing. Members of the public may view and listen to the meeting by use of Zoom as noted on the city's website and as noted on the agenda. Members of the public wishing to speak to the Planning Commission may do so during public comment or may comment on agenda items during the discussion of each item and must be logged into Zoom. Anyone using abusive, vulgar, offensive, threatening, or harassing language, personal attacks of any kind, or offensive terms that target specific individuals or groups will be muted and removed from the meeting. Please do not abuse this new way to provide public comment. All right, then we will move on to a roll call, please, Carrie.
Thank you, Chair Fritz. I will start off. Commissioner Burns. Commissioner Fernandez.
Here.
Sorry, I was muted.
I couldn't tell if that way I heard you or not, so thank you. Commissioner Fernandez, I heard you here. Commissioner Kelly.
Here.
Commissioner Douch.
Here.
Vice Chair Ottinger.
Here.
And Chair Fritz.
Here.
And so we have a full complement tonight of 6.
Great.
And I want to thank Zach for being willing to stay on until the council could determine how to fill the vacancy or what to do with that. So thank you, Zach, for joining us.
Yeah.
Although he could throw us into a tie.
I will
Just
say
you
I've
wait.
had that happen before. Tie votes are not affirmative. So
I know. He could throw this whole evening off. All right, we do not have any minutes to approve. So now is the time when members of the public who wish to speak on an item not on tonight's agenda may do so. I don't see anyone that's not related to this, but is there anyone that would like to say something not on tonight's agenda?
okay, and I can note, Chair Fritz, that we have not received any comments for anything for the commission. We have received a couple of comments on the Calder Creek options, which is going to council next week. And I'm also happy to share those with the commission as well if you would like. They'll be in the staff report that'll come out tomorrow or the next day.
Okay, that'd be good. All right, so we'll close public comments. Do any planning commissioners have a conflict of interest on any of the items on tonight's agenda? All right, seeing none, let's move on to our continued public hearing for 709 First Street. It's a use permit for setback reduction. Carrie, you want to remind us of what's going on here?
And actually, I will ask Associate Planner John Jay to take this item.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, members of the commission. So this project is a continuation of the staff report that was heard on January 11th for the setback reduction in variance form. Staff had requested the commission to provide guidance on that project going forward, and it was the commission's direction to approve this project as a conditional use permit. So what we have tonight in front of you is the resolution with those conditions. Staff's been able to make the findings for the conditional use permit and has presented those within the resolution that you have in your packet.
Thank you, John. And so, Chair, what we're looking for tonight on this item is a motion and vote. But if there is any discussion regarding either modifications to the resolution or the findings or conditions, those would be required as well. We do not need to reopen the public hearing. We already had the public hearing.
Great.
However, you can do so at your pleasure.
Yeah. Are there any commissioners that have any questions or comments on the resolution or the conditions? Kathy? You're muted.
I was noticing that on the first page of the resolution, the second to the last paragraph doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Am I reading it wrong?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
What page is that?
The first page of the resolution, second to last paragraph.
It's page 2 of the staff report. Yeah, it reads, I think that maybe that it says provides housing for all residents, which didn't.
Yeah, so for that, I tried to find a general plan use that was a way that we could see this project as the ADU providing housing for residents within the city of Sebastopol. So that's from our general plan land use or general plan housing goal. So the special needs part is not directly for people with disabilities or anything like that. It's for folks who may have a hard time finding affordable options for housing. And this project, as presented, with it converting a old barn structure to another housing unit, was the reasoning behind that.
Okay, I get that. I think the word "and" in the second line needs to be deleted. To a non-conforming structure provides housing rather than the and that's where I was confused, I think.
And I would say, all residents of the community or something like that, or to residents of the community, because it sounds like, I wasn't sure if it was residents of the existing house, the people that are already living on the property residents, or the broader community residents. So maybe if that could be clarified, is like repair to a non-conforming structure and providing housing for members of the community.
Right, or you could just say housing opportunities.
Yeah, something like that would be fine too. Just provides housing opportunities. I like that.
Commissioner Fernandez, do you have a?
Yeah, actually, if I could ask a question of the applicant, Mr. Chapman. I just wanted to ask you if you're okay with all the conditions, if you have any concerns or questions at this point, and just give you the opportunity for that.
No, in fact, the plans as we submitted take into account a number of these already.
Okay.
So there'll be no problem at all.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Thank you for asking.
And I just had another clarification on the condition number 1A. It talks about adequate insulation in the north and east walls. Is that thermal insulation or acoustic insulation or both? And is there some definition of what that is instead of just adequate? It's just a little bit of a vague term.
Yeah, I think since there is the music room on that portion of the structure, having some sort of, I think, acoustic insulation there to block any noise going to the neighbor on that side would be more of a direct condition rather than, as you mentioned, it kind of being vague, adequate insulation.
So, most, thermal insulation provides acoustic qualities as well. So I guess I'm just trying to clarify, are we expecting them to go beyond what's required from a thermal standpoint? And if so, do we have some definition of what that is, I guess? Because to me, as an architect, I would read that as, well, I don't know how much insulation to provide because I'm not being given any sort of guidance.
Okay.
So I don't know if we know what that is right now, or if we can just say, there shall be, acoustic insulation in addition to the thermal insulation, or, I want to get through this tonight, so I'm just trying to think of a wording that would be,
Sure. I would,
clear.
sure, Fritz, I think acoustic insulation is fine. I guess one of the things we weren't sure of, does the wall between the music room and the ADU, both of which are conditioned spaces, an internal partition doesn't need to have insulation in it necessarily.
Yeah.
Given some of the comments from the commissioners, even though right now it's only being used for guitar and probably not amplified guitar, I don't know. We took that into consideration and thought, the north wall is the thermal insulation is probably the same, and frankly, if they use something like a rock wool instead of a fiberglass, it's going to have a better acoustic property.
Mhm.
I think that we in the planning department saw that something like that is adequate. There's some direction to be for that, but between the music room and the ADU, because the ADU is a residence,
Yeah.
we wanted to make sure there was insulation in that wall as well, where by building code it's not required.
So I guess I would say maybe that, because the way that reads to me again is in the north and east wall of the structure. So that would be like the overall building to me. So I think I would say between, in the north wall and the wall between the music room and the ADU. Then it's kind of clear that what the purpose, and put acoustic in for the insulation. There should be adequate, there should be acoustic insulation in the north wall and the east, and the wall between the ADU and the music room. Just to make that clear, what east wall we're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, does anyone else have any other comments on the resolution or conditions? And if not, would someone like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion for approval with the modifications are stated.
And would you like me to restate those, Everett? Because I understand them.
Yes.
At least, and feel free to correct me.
Okay.
So the modifications would be in the 7th paragraph, the 7th whereas. Whereas the Planning Commission finds that the proposed maintenance and repair to a non-conforming structure will provides housing opportunities consistent with the general plan, and then so forth.
Yep.
And then condition 1A shall be revised to say there shall be adequate insulation in the north wall and the wall between the music room and accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I said.
How about a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you.
And I'll do the roll call.
Sure, unless anyone has anything else to say, let's do a roll call. Go ahead.
Thank you. Commissioner Dauch?
I will abstain.
Okay. Commissioner Fernandez?
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly?
Aye.
Commissioner Burns?
Aye.
Vice Chair Ottinger?
Aye.
And Chair Fritz?
Aye.
Okay, and so that motion passes 5-0 with 1 abstention.
Great, thank you. Good luck, Mr. Chapman.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your assistance. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And I will note, because it's on the agenda and sort of the city's regulations, there is an appeal period of 7 days, which will end next Tuesday at 5 p.m. If there are no appeals during that time, the decision becomes final, and the appeals would need to be directed to the planning department, and you can contact John Jay with that. As I don't anticipate any appeals on this one, Mr. Chapman, if you wanted to proceed with the processing of the building permit can't be issued until after next Tuesday, but if you need to work with the building department to make any adjustments to the plans, normally we wait until after the appeal period, but I think in this case, since you're already working with them, that would be just fine.
All right.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.
You too, thanks. All right, so our next item is a public hearing for a zoning ordinance update to ban new gasoline stations and restrict the expansion of existing gasoline stations. Who's doing the staff report on this one?
And that is me. Thank you, Chair Fritz. So this is an item which was previously discussed by City Council at earlier, well, last year actually, and they requested that both the Climate Action Committee and the Planning Commission review and make a recommendation on this potential item to City Council. This would be a change, amendment to the zoning ordinance. It would move gas stations, which are currently conditionally permitted in 3 commercial zones in our city, to not be allowed in any new zones. The Climate Action Committee has already reviewed this item and unanimously recommended the item to the Planning Commission. We had a Planning Commission study session with you all in October of last year. And if you recall, it was unanimously supported to move this forward. So we're bringing the draft ordinance back to you tonight and a resolution for you to consider, which would recommend the City Council approve and adopt the zoning ordinance amendments. This is, Sebastopol's not the first community in the county to do such a move. Petaluma banned gas stations last year sometime, I think. The Sonoma County Regional Climate Protection Agency or Authority Board of Directors has also passed a resolution recommending cities and the county look at this. Councilmember Sarah Glade Gurney is our City of Sebastopol member of that board. So just to go over the highlights of this and sort of resolve some of the issues from our discussion, most of the discussion at the October 12th study session was more looking at the text and how the wordsmithing of how we would change the ordinance. The intent is, and we've resolved some of the language surrounding banning any expansion of the fossil fuel infrastructure of existing gas stations or the construction and permitting of any new fossil fuel infrastructure. We did have some discussion with the commission about we don't have electric vehicle charging stations as part of our code right now. This would not disallow that. It's very specifically worded that it's for fossil fuel infrastructure. The commission, and I thank you for this because it made my life a lot easier, did decide not to try to do changes to the EV infrastructure along with this item. So this item is simply to change and make, this would effectively make existing gas stations a non-conforming use. And so we have language similar to when we adopted the ban on new drive-throughs that allows existing service stations to be modified in terms of any health and safety, or in this case, any elements not related to the fossil fuel infrastructure. So basically you can't add pumps or increase the capacity of pumps, but if you had a station that had poor circulation or a cafe, or you wanted to add EV charging stations, I have had conversations with Chevron station, they're interested in doing something like that. You would still be allowed to do that. That would still require a conditional use permit under our non-conforming regulations, where any modifications to a non-conforming use require a conditional use permit reviewed by the Planning Commission. And that's actually fairly consistent with the fact that currently gas stations require a conditional use permit anyway, so any major modification would come before this commission as well. So what we've done, and we do list out several general plan goals, mostly related to the environmental section, the community and open space, or conservation and open space section, and those are listed on page 2 of the staff report. They include things like improving air quality in the city of Sebastopol, reducing emissions of greenhouse gases, promoting the conservation of energy and natural resources. And there are some city council goals as well that relate to creating safe and attractive environments for residents. Someone likes to live next to a gas station. And then, of course, respecting that this is an item of interest of the Climate Action Committee and the Climate Emergency Resolution that the Council had adopted in late 2019. Just to go through the ordinance changes, the definitions will change to define that an automatic gas station is specific to fossil fuel-based vehicles. The non-conforming section will add and note that, as I already noted, that existing stations can be modified with a conditional use permit, but cannot expand their fossil fuel infrastructure. Our use table would be modified to strike out in the commercial automotive gas and fueling stations as allowed uses. So the C's in the commercial, the general commercial district, the manufacturing, and the office light manufacturing district would all change to a dash, which means that they would not be permitted. And then we made some further text changes, which I won't review in detail, but basically we do have a section, a chapter 17.345 that relates to the design of gas stations and car washes. And so we changed that language so that it read that to clarify that it's existing automotive fueling stations and existing new car washes, since we're not banning car washes for tonight. We're looking at the fuel station component of it. In terms of the environmental review, there are a lot of exemptions in CEQA that we can look at for such an action. There is, the easiest one is that there is no reasonable way that this could cause harm to the environment. We already have 3 gas stations in town. There's 2 further out on 116, both to the north and south of town. You know, we're not in a place where people are going to have to be driving around town to find the gas station. So we already have 3, and as infrastructure and vehicles for electric vehicles diminish over time, there will be less demand. And so there's an exemption, which is a general rule that says, since CEQA is looking at environmental impacts from changes to your policies or projects, and harms that significant effects, negative impacts on the environment, anything that you're doing that is actually trying to improve the environment falls under the general. It's not foreseeable that this is going to cause harm to the environment. And then there are some CEQA statutes listed in terms of how the treatment of existing stations as well. I won't go into detail, but happy to answer any questions on those. And we have included a resolution for you to adopt and consider tonight. And then we did include a red line of the actual code, as well as a clean copy of what the ordinance that would go to council would be. And so I am happy to answer any questions that the commission may have.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Oh, and I did want to note, sorry, Chair Fritz, that we have received 2 public comments. Those have both been forwarded to the Planning Commission and posted on the website, and they were both in support of this item.
Yeah, I saw that. Thank you. Everett.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I understand this correctly. So say, I'll just pick a random gas station, say Rotten Robbie wanted to expand their car wash. How would this impact that ability?
So this would not change their ability to apply for an expansion or modification of their car wash. This is simply for the fossil fuel component, so you can add more fuel pumps.
Okay. And is there any current language that if, say, modifications are made, that they then have to conform to the new standards, or does it still, do they get grandfathered in?
Do you mean in terms of the,
Like environmental, like the machinery and recycled water and all of that?
so for the existing car washes, if they're going to modify, that would come to the planning commission. So if, say, Rod and Robbie's wanted to improve the circulation or install significantly different equipment, that kind of thing. We would certainly want to make sure it was going, coming closer into conformance in areas where they're currently non-conforming. In areas where they do conform with this code, they would still need to maintain the site design standards that are in
So if they want to
zoning
replace,
ordinance.
say, an existing piece of equipment, they don't necessarily have to meet the standards of someone that's new. Is that
Right, because it was permitted prior to these standards being in place.
And is that something that can be added to it, or is it because they, what point does the machine that they put in, if it's, A, B, or C choice, and, and it's not very environmental friendly, but it does fit in and replace it. I'm just trying to understand, put my head
So if
around.
they were to do something that would require a building permit, normally the building department would forward that to the planning department. At that point, we would look at it and see, do they have an option which would meet our standards, and work with them to do that. That wouldn't necessarily come to the planning commission as its normal maintenance. Our non-conforming code section allows a property owner with it's not a non-conforming use. A car wash is not a non-conforming use, but a non-conforming facility, such as actually the last item, which was, doesn't conform to the standards. Our non-conforming ordinance allows an owner to make ordinary repairs, which could include equipment replacements up to 10%. I believe it's 10% of the property value. If they go beyond that, then it does trigger, just like ADA gets triggered once you do a certain level of construction. So if it goes beyond a certain level of changes to the facility, that's when it would trigger. And we would need to work with them specifically to see where they could become more in compliance. And as city staff, we're certainly aware of some of the noise issues and some of the circulation issues, which is probably why we added these standards.
Yeah.
So we would certainly work with them to try to get it further into compliance.
Okay. And then same question is for the abandoned station, is the 365 days, is that a requirement, or how is that determined, that amount of time?
So our non-conforming code actually says anything that requires a use permit, if it's abandoned for more than 12 months or 365 days, the use permit is considered to be expired at that point. Now, certainly during COVID, there were some places that, like we had the Barlow Event Center, need to be closed for a certain amount of time, and we waived those types of things in extraordinary circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, if one of our existing gas stations was to close down and not be operated for more than 365 days, then that would trigger this. Normally, we know because a business license is closed out and people stop paying their sales tax to the city. So our finance department knows at least approximately when, for a gas station, certainly that pays sales tax, we would know when they closed.
Okay. And then what standards, so if say a gas station closed, normally the gas station is open, some leaks happen or whatever, it's going to be more noticeable and found. Are there standards or how do we keep, let's say it's abandoned and it's coming disrepaired and maybe there's leakage of chemicals or that kind of thing. How's that handled?
Right. So there are state regulations that govern this. And so and actually a lot of the underground tanks that exist in gas stations need to be upgraded because state standards were, so it's sort of the building code, if you will, for, even though it's not a building, but there are state codes and requirements for that. And so they would need to mitigate to those standards. And I have seen at least one of those in my professional career where, a gas station, it closed down and turned into a bank, actually. And so they did have to do the tank, they do have to go in and do the tank mitigation and either fill them or line them or pull them out of the ground and do any soil remediation that's required.
Okay. And last question is, if there's a change, let's say Chevron closes or sells to Shell, they come in and rebrand and they're open. Does that trigger a review? It's the same, operation. It's just a new owner.
No, change of ownership. All planning entitlements run with the land, not with the owner. So a lot of times, we just had a bar, Mother's Room, changed ownership. And that doesn't trigger, their use permit is still valid. They're actually one of the ones where I don't think that we're closed for 365 because of COVID, but because of COVID restrictions, we were working with them as best we could.
Okay, I'm just wondering if, I guess, can it warrant a little more scrutiny with the new ownership, or would that have to apply to all business ownerships?
It would have to be consistent across all. And I think maybe a good example is with our drive-throughs. Mm-hmm. So most of you know, we used to have a McDonald's down in the South Point Shopping Center. And that, I think it was a restaurant for a while, but Starbucks bought it and they didn't change the drive-through in a way that increased the capacity of the drive-through. So because it hadn't been closed for more than a year, they were able to just take that over, and there was no triggering of the fact that it's a non-conforming use. And so they were just able to move forward as a new owner and take that over.
Okay, thank you for those clarifications.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else have any questions of staff? I have a
Commissioner. Sorry, go ahead.
I have a question, and this is sort of I don't know if we don't necessarily need to take care of this today, but just as something that I think is a little confusing is, in this section, you've crossed out all the service station references. We still do have some service station references other places in the code that we should either, and there's no definition of what a service station is, which in my mind, a service station is a gas station, but the way that some of the definitions in the code and the sort of definition section, it sort of pops up in weird ways. So I just want to add that to it needs to be taken care of. This kind of,
right.
You just search for all the service, sort of references in the zoning code and get rid of them or clean them up somehow.
Sheriff Fritz. I think that's something that's minor enough. We can actually go through our code and make sure we catch the rest of those and add those to the ordinance so that it's a clean, clean break. Yeah, thank you.
Sure, yeah, because it just sort of happens a lot in random places. In the table, and that table 1725, it just happens in a lot of places. And it's well, what is a service station? And then you look and there's no definition for it. And so anyway, it's just kind of confusing.
Yeah, that is frustrating. And it's not just necessarily just our zoning ordinance. When we changed the zones from, rural residential and whatever they were, all the names to our numbers. Mm-hmm. Our animal keeping ordinance in the health and safety section still refers to the zones by the old names. And so I've had to do an interpretation to map that out until we can clean that up. So yes, it's definitely worth another look. Thank you, Chair.
Sure. And then I did have a question in the resolution. There were two, let's see, where was it? There's two, so on page 8 of the staff report, And then also on page 9, they both refer to this, the city council resolution declaring a climate emergency. The one on page 8 has a little bit more information about it. And then the one on page 9, it just seems like it's somewhat redundant. I don't know. I think we can maybe delete the one on page 9.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Do you see that?
Yeah, that does make sense. Let's, I would suggest you on page 9, since that's all it states. Is that they're
Yeah. And that's stated, that's already stated on page 8.
Yep. Thank you.
So I don't have any other questions. Does anyone else have any other staff questions before I open to public? Deborah? Yeah, go ahead, Deborah.
I just have a quick question just to clarify. So like the gas station that's in town, you know, catty corner from Rite Aid, that hasn't been operational for, I think, much longer than a year. On Main Street right there. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
I didn't hear the location exactly. Where did you say?
It's like across from Rite Aid, kitty corner from Rite Aid on Main Street.
It's a smog check.
Oh, yeah, that's a smog check.
It's a smog check, but at one time there was gas stations. So obviously I understand if it's 365 days, they lose their permit to have gas there ever again. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes, and in fact, right now they would need to apply for a conditional use permit to get them back again. You know, to an amendment to their use, but they would need to come to the city and ask for approval for that. So that would come to you. If we pass this, they just simply would not be able to even apply for that.
Yep, that was my question.
Anything else before we open up public comment? All right, then I will open this item up for public comment. So if members of the public would like to speak on this item, now is your opportunity. You will each have 3 minutes, and you can either raise your virtual hand or wave at us and we will call on you. So I see Woody. So Woody, if you want to unmute yourself, can you see the timer?
And Chair Fritz, just to clarify, we're actually opening a public hearing tonight, not just public comment.
I'm sorry, public hearing. We're opening the public hearing.
Just for the record, sorry.
Wow, a public hearing. Okay.
Public hearing.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Then that works for a hearing. I think I'll be brief, hopefully less than 3 minutes. So I don't see the clock, but I'll just be brief. And I'm really just here, Woody Hastings. I live just outside of Sebastopol city limits. Moved here in 2009. And I am the co-coordinator of the Coalition Opposing New Gas Stations. Yes, we wear our position on these matters on our sleeve. And so just here tonight in full-throated support of the Planning Commission, voting yes to move this forward to the City Council. And I really appreciate, the Planning Commission and all the leadership at Sebastopol kind of keeping it simple to stopping the construction of new gas stations and not trying to add in other things that can complexify it and bog it down. Just that's really all I wanted to say. So just really appreciate you taking the time to have this on your agenda, and looking forward to hopefully you all voting in favor of moving it forward to the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Woody. Sunny, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yes, Sunny Galbraith, and I'm the chair of our City Zero Waste Committee and local teacher and 350 Sonoma, and I just joined the North Bay Jobs with Justice Board, and I'm so happy you're considering this, and I'm very appreciative of Woody and Jenny Blaker and others that have been leading on this, and in full support. And just want to say from my experience on the Zero Waste Committee, our town is small but mighty, and we are often the first people to do awesome things. And then it gives other cities permission to do it. They don't have to feel like the radical first city. We have a lot of support for this here. Like we were the first city to pass the zero waste ordinance, or the zero waste, the foodware or polystyrene ban. And we updated our zero event policy to make it so people having events had to do certain zero waste things, and that's now being used at the county level, and other cities have passed those. So you can see a wonderful turn by passing this, and then also be a wonderful example to other cities. And I used to live next door to a gas station some years back, the Rotten Robbie's, and I would say it's also, an environmental justice issue for people that have to live right near a gas station. That is a significant air quality issue. So it's not just better for our carbon footprint as a whole to not build out more gas infrastructure. It's also really a justice issue for people that have to live adjacent to gas stations. So thank you so much for being leaders on this. I really, really appreciate your hard and diligent work.
Thank you. Would anyone else, any other members of the public like to speak on this item? I don't see anyone. Do you see anyone, Carrie?
I do not see anyone. I'm just checking. I don't see anyone in the, if you are having problems with technology, you can, if you want, in the chat, or just simply unmute yourself and start speaking at this point. Okay, I do not see any further public comment, Chair.
All right, then we will close the public hearing and bring this back to the commission for further discussion, deliberation, comments, resolutions, motions. Anyone?
I'd like to go ahead and motion for approval with the changes that we had discussed, or eliminations of the double wording.
Second.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, then if you could take a roll call vote, please, Carrie.
Thanks, Chair Fritz. Commissioner Kelly.
Yes, yes, yes.
Commissioner Burns.
Yes.
Commissioner Douch.
Aye.
Commissioner Fernandez.
Aye.
Vice Chair Ottinger.
Yes, yes.
And Chair Fritz.
Aye.
I will thank you very much. That is a unanimous vote. I count that as 11-0. Thank you all for your time tonight. I do anticipate, and actually one more piece of good news, Roanoke Park is also taking up, their council is actually taking up the very starting point discussion of this. So I know Woody is about to travel off and go over there and answer a couple of other people. So thank you for your time tonight. This item will likely be heard on the March 1st City Council agenda. That's not really confirmed until the week or so before that agenda comes out, but that's with our noticing and whatnot, we anticipate we'll have everything ready to go for them.
Great. Thanks. Thank you for your work on this, Woody.
Thank you all. Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Okay. So moving on, we have item 8A is a climate action framework presentation. So Carrie, would you like to let us know what this is about?
All right, thank you. So several climate initiatives going on this year. As most of you may know, the Climate Action Committee really got up and running last year. And in this year's budget, we were able to apply for and received a Civic Spark Fellow, Phoebe Golden, who has been at a couple of Planning Commission meetings previously. Civic Spark is similar to the AmeriCorps program, but focused on climate issues. She is working on and about to kick off an effort for a climate action framework. Just a little background, the RCPA had put together along with the various cities and county, climate action plan back in, I want to say it was 2014 or 2015. that was through 2021. So obviously we're past that date. And so there's a need to update and really look at, we're not doing a full climate action plan. That document was literally a couple pages, a couple inches thick. But as a small town, we are interested in action and what we should be doing and being thoughtful about our actions. And so we applied for and received the Civic Spark Fellow Phoebe to help us put together a climate action framework to help organize all of that. And she is about to kick off, and we'll hand it over to her, but she's about to kick off that project.
Great, thank you, Carrie. And will I be able to share my screen for this?
Absolutely. Sam, can you make Phoebe a co-host?
Great, thank you. All right, can everyone see the slides okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, so as Carrie said, my name is Phoebe Golden. I'm Sebastopol's Civic Spark Fellow. I'm working with the Climate Action Committee to develop the Climate Action Framework, which will be a plan to reduce emissions and prepare for the impacts of climate change in Sebastopol. And I think folks are already sort of aware of this. Carrie gave a little background, so I'm just going to go through some additional background really quickly and then want to get to asking you all for your input on this project. So the framework is building on a lot of actions Sebastopol has taken in the past to protect the health and well-being of its community members and the environment. We've got the mandatory solar ordinance, joining Sonoma Clean Power, debuting the first electric bus in Sonoma County, and among other actions that have reduced emissions. And I'll add the gas station ban, which is in consideration. All these actions are reducing Sebastopol's emissions and making Sebastopol a healthier place to live. And they're really important because we know what the alternative looks like. Sebastopol is already starting to experience some of these impacts of climate change, from the more intense fire season to more frequent flooding events. And we know that these impacts are really difficult to live with, and particularly for the most vulnerable among us. And we also know that these changes are caused by human emissions from burning fossil fuels. So in Sebastopol, are you still seeing my slides? They're just giving me a weird message. All right. So in Sebastopol, about 73% of these emissions are from transportation, so driving. And the remaining quarter is from buildings. So that's primarily your home heating, water heating systems, as well as gas stoves, lights, all that. And Sebastopol has reduced its emissions. So since 1990, there's been about an 8% reduction in emissions, according to the 2018 inventory, which is the last one. The RCPA is just starting this year's inventory. So that'll be hopefully coming out this year. But we know we need to do more to avoid those climate impacts worsening. So Carrie gave a little bit of this background. I'm sure you all are aware of the Climate Emergency Resolution, which was in 2019. That set the goal of net zero emissions by 2030. And then the Climate Action Committee was created after that resolution and began meeting in January 2021. So the Climate Action Framework is sort of the next step in this process, figuring out what we do with the resolution and what the committee can help put in place to help Sebastopol meet that goal of net carbon neutrality. And so that's the goal of the framework, is to identify specific, equitable, and affordable climate policies that the city can adopt, both to reach carbon neutrality, so balancing out our emissions, as well as preparing for these climate change impacts that the city is already beginning to experience. And as I've said, the framework sort of has those two parts to it. The first is mitigation, so reducing our emissions, and then adaptation, which is preparing for impacts that we can't avoid anymore. And To make that a little more concrete, some examples of strategies the city might consider on the mitigation side would be an all-electric reach code to require the use of efficient electric appliances instead of natural gas. That could also include supporting public transportation and more electric vehicle charging stations to reduce emissions from driving. And then on the adaptation side, some strategies that we could consider are prioritizing buildings in areas that aren't prone to flooding or fires, as well as helping existing developments prepare for flooding and other climate impacts. And there are some overlap between those two categories. For example, urban forests are in the middle here, and those help with both because our trees and plants breathe in carbon dioxide, so preventing those emissions from going into the atmosphere and contributing to more warming. And they also provide shade, which helps us adapt to higher temperatures. And this is just to highlight that we have a lot of great models and resources out there that we can reference in Sebastopol. And so you are all aware of the Regional Climate Protection Authority. This is their Sonoma Climate Mobilization Strategy. And there's also many other cities and organizations out there working on climate action. And so what we aim to do with the framework is figure out what Sebastopol's role is in all of this and what elements from other cities are relevant here, what's not, and really chart out the path for Sebastopol. So the timeline for this, it's a process that's going to be unfolding over the next 8 months or so. As Carrie mentioned, I'm now sort of kicking off the community engagement for the framework. We have a meeting coming up on February 2nd at 6 p.m. to introduce the process and start getting that community input. We also have a survey that's just launching to get input that way. And we're tabling at a couple of locations, including at the farmers market. And all of that input that we get from the community will be used to inform the research and writing of the plan, with the goal of having a draft sometime this summer and bringing that back to the community for feedback before it goes to City Council. So I mentioned that meeting on February 2nd. There was some concern about if all of the planning commissioners were to attend, there might be some possible Brown Act violations. So that's why I wanted to bring this to you tonight and give you all the chance to ask questions and give your input on this initial stage of the framework. I'm sure it'll come back to you again at some point later. But these are the sort of questions that I'll be asking the community and want to ask you all as well, which essentially boils down to, as planning commissioners, what climate change impacts are you most concerned about, and what do you want me and the Climate Action Committee, I know some of you are also on the Climate Action Committee, what should we be considering and prioritizing while developing this framework? So I'll stop on this slide and let you think about that. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions or comments.
Thank you, Phoebe. Any commissioner have any questions or thoughts about this that they'd like to share? Go ahead, Everett.
Hi, Phoebe.
Hi.
I appreciate what you're doing, and I wanted to publicly reiterate my support and offer my help. I've had some issues that come up, and I apologize for not having been very communicative, but I wanted to just let you know that I'm available and ready to assist however I can.
Great, thank you.
So does anyone have any thoughts about these questions that Phoebe has up at this point? Anyone?
Well, I'll jump in real quick on a few points here. I'm not sure I can answer all these questions, but I think that in thinking about resiliency in the city and how resiliency choices need to be considered carefully to be equitable. And I think sometimes it becomes the catch-22 is finding answers that don't, generate obstacles to low income or other marginalized groups who are less able to accommodate new restrictions or costs or obstacles to public transport or other services in the city. So I think that's something that has to be front and center as we think about these things and as we integrate new systems or processes into our city in regard to these things. Some of them are constraining. Some of them are mean giving things up, giving up conveniences. But giving up conveniences is easy for some of us and less easy for others. So I think that's an important element.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Thank you.
Anyone else have anything they'd like to share with Phoebe? Go ahead, Kathy. You have to unmute yourself, Kathy.
We were recently looking at the Ives Park proposals, and we were discussing barbecues and the need to have barbecues burning in the park versus using other types of fuel sources for cooking in the park or not having them at all. And those are hard decisions to make, but they're things that we need to keep thinking about when we're planning for new structures and new homes. Should they be all electric or gas, and should they all have hookups? And I really think it's important that we put this information into our planning documents and our zoning code, so that we do start implementing and making these hard choices. And we know it's difficult for people, but we really don't have a lot of alternatives to surviving on planet Earth. So it's important that we do it and take the responsibility and be bold in what we do.
Deborah?
I'd like to thank Phoebe because I am on the Climate Action Committee, so I get to talk about this a lot, but watching what you've done from beginning until now has just been, I just thank you so much for your work on this. And then also to add to what Kathy said, I think one thing that's very concerning when you talk about barbecues is the quality of our air with the fires and, the effect it has, especially on our young children. And taking those type of adverse health effects that we're getting from barbecues, all that. I think the more that we can mitigate. I was looking at our air this week and it was red on purple air, and yet I saw everybody's fireplaces on because it was so cold, and I did see people barbecuing. And I think these are things, anything we can do to really help with that, as I see these little kids coughing on the street in these air days. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to, yeah, go ahead, Linda.
Hi, Phoebe. Thanks for all the hard work. It's an issue we've all been working on, and it's just so nice to have the next generation behind us who have been, working on these issues forever. The city has passed years ago, when I was on the city council, a wood burning appliance ordinance that you might want to look at, and also Deborah. And it was one of the strictest ones around, because not only did we require at sale to have the old polluting wood stoves changed out, and most people then changed to other ways of heating when they were doing that. But it also at sale of a house that had to be changed out. And boy, we got pushback from the Realtor Association in the county threatening to sue us on that, because anything to hold up a sale, like, you know, changing out an old wood stove to a EPA, now they're even better than they were. But it was a quite a fight. It took a while to put this ordinance together. And we also got recognized by the Bay Area Air Quality Control Board, because we were much stricter than what Santa Rosa was able to do. So, and every time I see a wood stove chugging out particulate matter, I'm a nurse on the side, and respiratory health for our children and for seniors, and on these spare the air days, you know, so many members of the public would do the right thing, but they really don't know. So we have to always be mindful to remind the public through our ways of advertising what our requirements are on so many things in the city, you know, not just wood stoves, but thanks again for taking the reign and moving forward. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I did not know about the wood burning ordinance, so I'll definitely be looking into that.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. And I was also going to add, you know, as the Planning Commission, we obviously have a lot to do with land use and how development happens in town. And I thought it was interesting, the slide you shared that showed how much of our greenhouse gases come from transportation. You know, obviously it's a huge percentage of our emissions in town. And, you know, that really speaks a lot to how we've been developing over the past really 80 years, you know, the kind of single family subdivision, everything kind of spread out, uses all separated from each other. And I think we really need to think hard about, you know, moving forward with how do we encourage more, infill development and having more people live in places where they don't need to get in a car to get someplace, because the fewer car trips people are able to make, obviously that directly ties to the amount of emissions coming out from our cars, most of which are still, even though electric cars are we're seeing more and more of them, there's still, most of the cars out there are fossil fuel burning cars. So every time people get in their cars, it adds to, climate change pollutants. So I think really trying to encourage, we're doing a lot to encourage ADUs. I think we really need to push hard on doing that, getting more people living in town so we don't have people driving into town and through town to get other places. And also, by the same token, making sure that we have, the goods and services that people need and want in our community. And we're not having to drive to Santa Rosa or drive to Windsor or drive to wherever to get things that we can't get in Sebastopol. So I think that's an important piece as we, something that we have some play with as Planning Commission. And also just that speaks to kind of the public transportation aspect as well. We just don't have the kind of population density to support more frequent transit service. And, that's kind of a chicken or egg thing. We don't get more transit service till we get more housing along transit lines. So we don't get housing on transit lines, but we don't have a lot of transit. And so, but as much as we can try to build housing, along the 116 corridor in particular, since that's where most of the bus route runs. Again, I think that will encourage more people to be able to, when buses run more than once an hour or once every hour and a half, people are going to be more likely to take the bus. And so I think that's something really important to look at. And I'm just going to say, when I first moved to Sebastopol 20 years ago, I was still working in San Francisco, and I was able to take a bus from 2 blocks from my house to the financial district in San Francisco, and you can't do that anymore. You know, I mean, we've kind of gone backwards in a lot of ways in terms of kind of public transportation. So, you know, looking at those kind of options, you know, why did Golden Gate Transit kill that transit line? Is there a way that we can get that back? You know, so we can have a direct connection between Sebastopol and San Francisco, because people still work in San Francisco, and a lot of them, most of them probably drive themselves. So how do we increase those kind of public transportation opportunities, I think is an important piece of the pie, particularly given how much of our transportation, or how much of our emissions come from transportation.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Deborah?
I agree with you. I think, you know, one thing we really need to look at is we really don't have enough electric fueling stations, and we really don't have the amount of electric cars. I know they're expensive and a lot of people can't afford them, and just, you know, all of that kind of stuff. But how could we get, you know, how could we support more people driving alternative cars? Because the truth is that Sebastopol isn't going to be able to house every need that people need. They're going to drive to Santa Rosa to go to Costco or wherever it is that they go, and people are going to drive. They're used to driving. So we can get alternative, you know, vehicles out there. And how can we support that through infrastructure with stations and whatnot? I think is also really important.
Well, if I can tag on to that, I think an interesting way to maybe look at that is, you know, like an electric car share program. You know, I mean, places that have car share programs, and we don't, again, have kind of the population density, it might be harder to do in Sebastopol, but, you know, everyone having their own electric car, you know, there's a lot of, obviously electric cars are a lot more efficient than fossil fuel burning cars, but there's a lot of emissions that go into producing electric cars as well, a lot of environmental issues. So is there a way that we can have a car share program in Sebastopol that people can, you know, use an electric car when they need to do a longer run to Santa Rosa or someplace out of town, but they don't have to have it parked, you know, in their driveway for, you know, 95% of the week. You know, that there's a car share program that people can pay into, and you can be able to rent a car and take it on those kind of shorter trips to run errands around the county. You know, I think something like that, I think, could be kind of interesting to look at. And I don't know the financial aspects of that or how that would possibly work, or who funds that, or but I think that would be something interesting to look at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is an interesting idea.
Any other feedback or thoughts for Phoebe? Well, thanks for bringing this to our attention, Phoebe, and it's exciting to hear that this is underway, and good luck with getting more input and feedback from the community, and we look forward to getting the draft report and being able to give you some more feedback on that at that time.
Great. Yeah, thank you all so much for your time and feedback on this.
All right. Do I need to open public hearing for this? Now that you just left, or I don't know if you have anything else here.
We should actually open public comment to see. I know we do have some members of the public, and I saw one in the chat at least who had a couple of thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. So if any member of the public would like to speak, you can raise your hand now, your virtual hand, or wave at us or make a noise, and you can have 3 minutes to make any comments. Not seeing anyone. So, all right, we will close public comment on this item. Thanks again, Phoebe.
Thank you, Phoebe. And if any of the commissioners are interested in attending the, although it'll be similar, but to hear the members of the public attending the session next Wednesday the 2nd, if you could let me know, I can make sure that we don't have a quorum of the planning commissioners there. but certainly we have some openings there.
Right, thanks. Next on our agenda, we have subcommittee updates. Do we have any updates from anyone? Seeing nothing, no one jumping up. Let's move on to the planning director's report.
Thank you, Chair Fritz. A few items coming up of interest to the Planning Commission. Let's see, at the last City Council hearing or meeting, they did have a pretty lengthy item talking about RV parking within the city. And they did pass first reading of an ordinance that would limit, and of course, this goes along with sort of in tandem with opening the safe parking RV parking site on North Gravenstein. But they did adopt some restrictions regarding RV parking in town. The details of that are probably in the newspaper and probably on, they're definitely in the staff report. They did go with the police chief's recommendations on that. It will not be a permit system. It simply limits on the amount of time a homeowner can park in front of their house, and restrictions for when our commercial and industrial areas. Can you hear me? Okay, it's saying I'm muted, so that's sort of weird, but okay.
You were briefly, but you're back.
All right. So the upcoming City Council meeting on next Tuesday, actually I should say they do have a retreat tomorrow morning, and that agenda is on the website if you're interested. Retreats, as you know, they're not regular business. It's more an opportunity for team building for the council. They will have a regular City Council meeting next Tuesday. On that will be the Calder Creek naturalization item. I have had several conversations with the Little League, and unfortunately we didn't have them attend this meeting. They are obviously greatly concerned. So I've been working with them and talking with them. I anticipate they will have a pretty strong attendance at the meeting for that. So I am glad the commission was forwarded 2 different options to the council to consider, so that there are options for them to look at. The Planning Commission ordinance update will also be, that got bumped, but that will also be on next Tuesday's agenda, as will the mid-year budget discussions. The Planning Department does not have anything significant on budget requests on that. We are staying within our budget, and our next Planning Commission meeting we do anticipate having, it looks like we'll have, sorry, I have my meeting forecast up. We will have one item for that, which is actually a subcommittee update. Our design guidelines subcommittee has been working with John Jay and others in the city on standard conditions of approval. And so those will be coming to the Planning Commission at their February 8th. They're currently under final review by the committee, but it'll be coming to Planning Commission on February 8th for review. After both the DRB and Planning Commission have reviewed those will go on to City Council. And then I do anticipate actually the next meeting, in addition to that item, we would have time to start the Planning Commission training session that the commission discussed. So those are the 2 items I anticipate for your next meeting. And then just looking forward, the March 1st City Council meeting has a couple items of interest. The Huntley Square Townhome project did get continued from the last City Council meeting to the March 1st meeting. So that will be, and that'll be one of the first items that'll be up. And I believe Chair Fritz, you're our liaison to that meeting. And then 4 Leaf will also be having a housing element workshop with the city council that evening as well. And then the gas station ban, I'm also looking to put on that calendar, assuming, as I always like the caveat that the city council agenda is not set until the Tuesday before when the packet comes out. But they did specifically continue the Huntley Square item to March 1st. And in order to keep on track with our housing element, we do need to have that workshop that evening. And so I do anticipate certainly both of those items. One of the updates from state law is that the state Office of Housing and Community Development, HCD, which reviews all housing elements, was given an extra 30 days to review housing elements. However, cities and communities were not given an extra 30 days as to when our housing elements are due. So that kind of got subtracted from our time. We as a city are in pretty good shape though, but that's that March 1st will be critical for us to continue our good progress on that. So I think that is it. We do have sculptures down at Ives Park. There are 3 sculptures at the sculpture park. Unfortunately, I do need to report that one of them, there were 4. One of them has been taken away. It was the very first night, unfortunately. And then again, a couple nights later that weekend, and the second time it was damaged and not just knocked out its face. So very unfortunate. And the artist was very understanding. And unfortunate progress. There are, however, 3 robust sculptures there right now. So if you do have a chance to take a walk through the park, please do. And our public art committee will be organizing a somewhere grand opening and potential sculpture jam event for later this spring. They postponed it due to the COVID surge and not wanting to have a large gathering. But if the weather lightens up by the time we have it as well, there may be some additional opportunities.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Never.
Thank you, Carrie. Regarding the Planning Commission item that the council is going to be talking about regarding, the areas to make appointments and so forth. One of the items that we had talked about in the council also talked about is the consideration of reducing the number of commissioners from 7 to 5, and that they would revisit that. I think majority of us, I think, recommended that to the council, but it's not on the particular agenda. I did speak to one of the council members about it and was asked that the Planning Commission needs to bring that up, but I think we need direction from the council, but since it's not on their agenda, and since we have 2 openings, I just think it's ideal time. And I'm just wondering if get some guidance. What do you think, how we might want to handle that?
Yes, so I was asked to include, so that Planning Commission ordinance to also include in that staff report for the council to give direction on the 2 vacancies.
Okay.
I think, this group, and I can certainly express, and I forget who is Kathy, are you the liaison or is it you, Everett? For the February 1st meeting?
Yeah, I think I am.
Okay, Everett, you are. So Everett, I think you can certainly represent the Planning Commission's prior discussions and interest in that as part of, and I can certainly hand that off to you to express that since there will be a request for council to provide direction on the Planning Commission.
Okay.
Our current ordinance, I did look this up after our last Planning Commission meeting when the question was raised. Our current ordinance does allow the planning, does not require a change to the zoning ordinance or to the Planning Commission ruling ordinance to reduce the number to 5. It just requires a resolution of the city council. So they could direct staff to, it says no less than 5 or whatever number the city council approves, and they may approve that by resolution. So certainly one of the things they could do, they could change the ordinance for the geography part of it But then they could also request a resolution if they wanted to reduce the number of planning commissioners, and that would be a simple consent item, presumably on the next council item.
Okay.
Council
Yeah, and I just
agenda.
looked up, I am for February, and Paul is the alternate. But
Okay, great.
and I will be there.
Okay, great. And yeah, as the one of the Ives Park subcommittee folks, I'd like to say that's ideal planning, but that's dumb luck on my part.
I don't know, just take credit for it.
Anyone else have any questions? I had a question. Did those Conestoga huts or Conestoga homes at the church ever get installed?
They are up and running. Yes, I
Okay.
apologize. There was an article in the Press Democrat. I think they've been up for at least a couple months, actually.
Oh, good.
So, yeah. Yeah, or maybe it probably was in the Press Democrat. I think it was a Sonoma West Times. I want to give credit where credit's due, but it was in one of the local papers when they were constructing them and putting them up. And it was 2 or 3 months ago.
Oh, good. And my other just note, going through this gas station item made me remember I wanted to, at some point, on a hopefully future upcoming agenda, I wanted to take a look at the table 1725-1, the commercial use table, because when the car wash came through, there was again this little bit of discrepancy. We have automotive repair and service, and then we had automotive sales, service, and repairs, 2 separate items, and they're conditioned and permitted in different zones. And I think we should have a conversation about that, because my recollection when we did the last zoning code update was that we were trying to eliminate those uses downtown, and the way the table is written right now, it's confusing and not clear what is and is not allowed. So I would love for that to be on a future agenda at some point. If we can fit that in somewhere.
Okay, and I'm not going to promise a date on that because we.
You don't have to promise a date
pretty
now.
slammed right now.
I remember we had.
But I will put it on our pending, and actually it's already on our pending list, so I do have that as.
Okay, great.
Along with some additional market rate housing presentations, and so that's one where if any of the commissioners has a lead on someone who you'd be interested in presenting, I've heard a couple of commissioners express interest in that.
Okay. Great. And I'm excited that we're going to be able to start that training. Hopefully that is going to be good.
Chair Fritz?
Yes.
Linda Kelly?
Go ahead, Linda.
I appreciated you sending out the report from Generation Housing. I think that they did a good job at putting that information together. And also, if you didn't want to read, it was really nice to have all of the bullet points, for each section. And it wasn't too detailed, but it had a lot of information. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. I thought, if other commissioners haven't looked at that, I would suggest looking at that again as we go through this housing element update. It gives a lot. I mean, some of the stuff we've heard in some of the housing element meetings we've had, but there's a lot, and you don't have to read the whole report. It has some really good summaries where you can kind of read the bullet points and get the overall idea. And they have a lot of tables and graphs and things that are pretty clear and easy to read. And you can see how it's interesting, I think, because you can see how Sebastopol compares to other cities in the county, because they break it down by all 9 cities plus the county on a bunch of different metrics. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that, I would encourage you to do so. I also asked Carrie to send out another thing that I think might be interesting. So hopefully she can do that tomorrow. It's a webinar on this Thursday evening. So anyway, I just throw that out there if you're interested. I've been asked to participate as a kind of moderator, and it was a topic I think is somewhat applicable to us. So take a look at that if you have a chance. And if no one has anything else, I think that brings us to our adjournment until February 8th. So thanks, everyone, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks for not throwing us into disarray with a
Yeah, thanks,
vote.
Zach.
You're welcome.